Today we'll be talking about the lore of the Witcher series. This will be a multi-video series as the lore is pretty deep. Plan to focus on one subject at a time, possibly more if they end up overlapping. But within the game lore, Witchers are sometimes referred to as Vedmin or Witchmen. Of course, there is also Vatgern, which is the elder speech title given to Witchers. So you also hear that quite often in both the games and the books. But outside the lore, Hexer was the original English translation that the creator preferred till the first video game where a Witcher became widely adopted. I mentioned these first because the first video we're going to be looking deeper into the creation of a Witcher. But first, before we further look into the shaping of one, we should probably look first into the history of Witchers in the world. As humans settled in the northern part of the continent, they had to deal with a vast array of monsters that inhabited the land in which humans were poorly equipped to deal with. To fix this, the northern rulers tasked their mages to create magic-wielding warriors to deal with the monsters for them. As a result, the mages carried out experiments at Rissberg. The first Witcher was created. After the earliest attempts of creating Witchers with adults proved unsatisfactory, it was decided that children would be used for future experiments. The mage Alzur would travel for weeks collecting 38 children before bringing them to Rissberg Castle. At Rissberg, the children had to train day and night in order to prepare themselves for the coming experiments at the facilities mages had planned. This training included climbing cliff sides, running trap-laden obstacle courses, dodging swinging pendulums while blindfolded, and many other training methods. The training proved to be brutal, as before the mages could even begin their experiments, 4 of the children had already died. Among the remaining children was a skeleton boy named Erland of Larvik and an Edmedian girl named Jogoda. As these experiments continued, most girls grew ill, Jogoda among them. As those experiments officially began, the number of remaining children quickly dwindled. Jogoda died within the first week, and it took nearly a month for the mages to successfully transform one of the boys before creating the first Witcher. A week later, Erland was also successfully transformed. By the time all the children were put through the mutations, only 5 boys remained. However, the mages kept thoroughly inspecting and testing their surviving children before gathering professionals from all over, including hunters from Caedwin, alchemists from Vicarvo, and swordsmen from every corner of the continent. These professionals trained the boys in their respective skills. The huntsmen taught them to track and hunt, the alchemists on how to brew potions and concoctions, and the swordsmen on how to fight. Despite all of the children proved unsatisfactory. These mutations had opened their bodies to the flow of power, but they ended up with limited magical talent. Disappointed at this outcome, the Witchers were banished from Rissberg, but a few mages, such as Alzur, Kazimo, Malsupina, and Ildarin of Ulvo, decided to continue the experiment. The group ended up bringing the Witchers to the abandoned Morgorg castle on Kestrel Mountains to continue their experiments of training. Years later, Alzur, Kazimo, and Ildarin had left, leaving only a handful of mages to perform the mutations and leaving the order without a leader. While the Witchers traveled the all-known continent, and there were more than enough settlements and contracts to cause strife between them, they started to trick one another out of contracts and even threatening to kill each other if they didn't move on. One incident proved to be the catalyst of the end of the order. The Witcher Armageddon attacked another Witcher named Reese, nearly killing him. As Armageddon returned to Morgreg, he did so with a posse of his brothers. After a battle of the Order and the posse, the Order proved victorious despite many losses. Armageddon and his posse left the Order and traveled to Mel Mountains, where he later founded the School of the Bear. And where years later a group of Witchers would betray the school and nearly killed Armageddon. This group would turn and leave and create the School of the Viper in the Tir-Chokir Mountains. Before the establishment of the Viper School, another group of Witchers left to create the School of the Manticore, as they didn't agree with Ivar Evil Eye and his Witcher history ambitions. After tales reached the order of these new Witcher schools, 20 younger Witchers decided that they would create their own schools which would surpass the order to get them the respect of the continent. As they left, they took a great deal of mutagenic compounds and alchemical tools with them, in hopes they'd use these to improve the alchemical formula that created witchers. They ended up traveling to the Striga castle and took the name School of the Cat, and fashioned themselves a cat-shaped medallion. The remainders of the order soldiered on for some time, but becoming more disillusioned with their purpose, Morgreg became more of a sanctuary to hide than the home it had been prior. Eventually, Erlin decided to leave the order with 13 of his best friends, intent on not dealing another blow to the order or causing a massacre. They wanted to cause as little bad blood as possible. As such, they announced that they would leave and explained why to the last remaining once proud order. The group then traveled to Kaer Seren and created the School of the Griffin, having fashioned their school's name and ideas after their old sword trainer, Taliesin, otherwise known as the Griffin. The last witchers that remained in the order ended up leaving Morgreg and traveled east, eventually settling down in the Caramoran Valley. Here they founded the School of the Wolf and created wolf-shaped medallions for themselves, officially ending the original order of the Witchers. The time that came after would be remembered by the Witchers as the Golden Age, while scholars would call it the Second Era of Witchers. With the continent divided between the schools and each one creating their own Witchers, their work became efficiently organized. Past tensions between them calmed down, and when Witchers from different schools crossed paths, no blood was shed as they knew they had their own territory, making them treat other schools more like estranged brothers than bitter enemies like they did before. By the mid-1160s, Witcher has become too successful. With monsters having grown increasingly rare, this combined with a mixture of propaganda by the churches of the north and the distrust of many of the kingdom's rulers led to Witchers themselves being seen as monsters in most of the population's eyes. In turn, almost every known school came under attack from various groups of people. By the time the last school fell, the number of Witchers had diminished greatly, compounded by both those killed defending their schools and the loss of knowledge on how to create Witchers or so on, so more could be made. To create a Witcher, these Witchers have to endure grueling training that oftentimes ends in their death. Some boys are given to Witchers as babies, while some are taken as young as 4 years of age. Now, the age of these Witchers is very dependent on the condition of how the child comes into a Witcher's possession. Most times they are obtained through impoverished families, while other times they could be received through the Law of Surprise. The Law of Surprise is an ancient custom within the universe of the Witcher. It is the belief that destiny binds two people together. The most known case of this, of course, is between Geralt and Ciri within the books. This surprise isn't always a child, but is decently common. Denying this destiny oftentimes has dire consequences. The historical example of this would be the queen named Zavilina. She had refused to give up her child of surprise. Soon after, they would both be killed by a plague for attempting to cheat destiny. Destiny throughout the Witcher history has always proven to bring the two together no matter what, over and over and over again. Dandelion, of course, had mentioned this to Geralt at one point about him and Ciri. Now back to the boys who were taken into the Witcher's care. Upon entering the Witcher's school, the boys enter a long and brutal period of physical and mental training known as the Choice. Some of the physical conditioning includes long runs through the harsh mountain terrain, as well as demanding obstacle courses designed to build superhuman strength, endurance, and agility. They, of course, are also taught basic swordsmanship with wooden blades, where they learn to fight relying on speed and reflexes rather than brute force. Herbalism and monster lore are also very important early on. They must learn about their future foes and learn how to create powerful, sometimes very much needed potions, among more alchemical knowledge. Their diets also must go through a drastic change, although if they came from an impoverished family, this could probably be seen as an improvement, to be quite honest, where they must survive on special herbs and mushrooms to prepare their bodies for later mutations. But even this stage of training can be so brutal that these young Witchers to be may actually die. At around 8 to 10 years of age, these boys are then subjected to the trial of grasses, the most lethal part of their training by far, where only 3 of 10 boys end up surviving, and that's if they're lucky. The trial of grasses starts with a dose of tea infused with mutagens, and tea which immobilizes the boy and allows the mutations to take hold. This lasts for 3 days, but it's not as if these boys can move even if they weren't already practically paralyzed, as they're also tied down. Again, over these 3 days, they're injected with more mutagens, herbs, and even viruses directly into their bloodstream. Within the lore, the ingredients are closely guarded secret, known only to the mages who created the process and perfected it for each individual Witcher school. The included plants are as listed: corn lily, nightshade, speargrass, wild rye, wolfsbane, baronia, mandragora, and ribleaf. Multiple of these are also very poisonous. The monster ingredients are a forktail spine fluid, which comes from a very rare and dangerous monster, a manticore's poison gland, a tongue of an albino bruxa, as well as an albumin of a gray scolopendromorph, which is the egg white of a centipede-like monster. Now, the viruses used is unknown, at least as far as I could find, but they are extremely important in determining the success or failure of the entire process. During these 3 days, these children experience extreme fevers, convulsions, vomiting, and even organ failure. A majority of these boys die in this stage alone. Next is the stupor, a state of near unconsciousness where the boys are given a final, more concentrated dose of mutagens. Their bodies continue to convulse as their nervous systems, muscles, and bones are completely mermaid. The process is basically like creating a Spartan 2 in the Halo universe, but much, much more worse. Possible video on that later. But after a week of imaginal agony, the surviving boys, or even a single boy, awakens. His body is now rebuilt and transformed with a distinct features such as cat-like eyes, enhanced senses, as well as superhuman strength and reflexes. Their cat-like eyes are of course a staple, yellow with distinct vertical pupils which allow them to see clearly in the total near darkness. Their hearing also becomes heightened to a near superhuman level, which allows them to detect even subtle noises from a great distance, a sense of smell akin to the hounds, and a mystical sixth sense to allow them to detect magic, danger, and even the supernatural. They also gain accelerated healing. While they can obviously be killed, they can survive wounds that would normally kill anyone else and heal from them. Their new resilience to poison, magical effects, and diseases also allows them to consume toxic witcher potions that would normally kill humans. There is also their slowed aging. The mutagens overhaul witchers' metabolic and genetic systems, causing them to age at a significantly lower rate. One example would actually be Geralt himself. So at the time of The Witcher 3, Geralt is nearly 100 years of age, yet still appears to be in his late 30s. Vesemir being another one, as he is well over 200 years of age. There is no exact number, but he is between 200 and 300 years old, yet has the appearance of a 70-year-old that can still fight far better than mere men, albeit he is showing signs of age. The irony of these mutations is that they grant them exceptionally long lives. The Witcher's profession almost guarantees that they will not live long enough to experience it fully. Perhaps the most significant and tragic side effect of the mutation process is sterility. There is not an intentional part of the design, but an unfortunate side effect of the mutagens ravaging and rewriting the body's genetic code. This makes witchers infertile and prevents them from reproducing naturally, contributing to the decline of numbers of witchers over time. As I stated prior, only about 3 of 10 boys survive the process. There are a few examples of deaths within the books. In one case is a 9-year-old boy named Bartel, who died shortly after the first dose of mutagens due to heart failure. Another incident includes a 10-year-old boy named Daedric, who died of cerebral hemorrhage after a second dose of speargrass. Another 10-year-old who died of organ failure from multiple organs after initially surviving the process. Those who die, more often than not, do so in extreme agony. But some of these boys are lucky, and I should make you aware that I mean lucky in quotation, as they are left permanently disabled. An example is an 8-year-old boy named Jop, who survived the trial but suffered such extensive brain damage they had to be euthanized. The School of the Cats, for example, experimented with mutagens to suppress emotions, but this formula backfired and resulted in applicants having erratic and heightened emotions. It could probably be said that this could be one of the reasons people assume witchers are stripped of their emotions, but the reality is a bit more complicated than that. The myth is cemented in propaganda, superstition, but also a witcher's own conditioning and social isolation. At a young age, witchers are taught that their emotions are a hindrance to the work, which could interfere with the monster slaying, the requirements of professionally neutralness. Their training helps to detach themselves from the grim nature of their jobs, although some side effects that could occur during the trial of Crassus could be the cause to them to become more emotionally blunted, which allowed them to express their feelings in a more reserved manner than an average human. But this was not always the case, just a possible side effect. Due to both the training and their profession being so brutally dark, oftentimes they develop a emotional defense mechanism to cope with their experiments, but also public hatred, which there's a lot of. They're widely hated everywhere. But many witchers use their myth of no emotions to their advantage. They purposely present themselves as a cold, unfeeling mutants in order to gain an advantage in negotiations and to avoid being guilt-tripped into taking jobs for free. Sometimes the witchers will invoke the Witcher's Code, which in reality is a fabrication used to reject unwanted contracts as well. Although, technically there is a code, but it only applies Witcher to Witcher, not Witcher to non-Witcher. Anyway, back to the trials. There is one single case of a Witcher being subjected to additional, more painful experiments due to his resilience with normal trials. This would of course be the Mr. Main Character Energy himself, Geralt of Rivia. He, as you know, survived, but experienced a side effect, which is actually what resulted in his white hair. Now, there is nothing in the lore explaining what happens to the bodies of the boys who were killed due to these trials, but they were likely buried in unmarked graves in the mountains surrounding Witcher strongholds. Now, after that, yet another tangent, let's get back to the trials. Next is the Trial of the Dreams, which varies between Witcher schools. The Trial of Dreams refines the sensory enhancements granted by the Trial of Grasses, especially the Witcher's vision, hearing, and sixth sense. The trial induces vivid hallucinations and nightmares that test the candidate's sanity. They must endure this psychological torture without succumbing to madness. Unlike the alchemical nature of the Trial of Grasses, this trial has magical elements involving spells and rituals that manipulate a boy's sense of consciousness. For the survivors, the intense training continues for years to transfer them from a mutant into a skilled monster slayer. The boy masters complex and fast-paced sword forms, honing his speed and precision against training dummies and obstacles. He's taught the basic combat magic known as signs, simple spells cast with gestures. The signs include Ard. This is a psychokinetic spell which creates a telekinetic thrust of force. It can be used to stagger or knock opponents down, disarm them, or clear obstacles. Geralt also famously used Ard to stop a chaotic banquet in the books. There's Axii. The sign affects the target's mind with a hypnotic effect. It can be used to temporarily stun an opponent, manipulate them for information, or calm a creature like a horse. In the games, it's also used to charm enemies into fighting for you. Then there's Igni, a pyrokinetic burst of fire. Igni can ignite opponents, detonate flammable gases, and be used for mundane purposes like lighting a fire. Its power is more substantial in the games where it can be upgraded to a powerful stream of flame. Quen, which is known as the Witcher's Shield, Quen creates a magical field around the caster that absorbs damage. In the books, it primarily protects against magical or sonical attacks, while in the game it is an all-powerful, all-purpose shield. Yarden. This sign is used to lay a magical trap on the ground. Foes who enter its area of effect are slowed, damaged, or immobilized. It is especially effective against wraiths and specters, which are made corporeal and vulnerable within the trap. In the books, for example, Geralt uses this to lock a sarcophagus to trap a Striga. There is also Heliotrope, which is a potent defensive spell to cast by crossing the wrists. It provides a powerful, instantaneous buffer against strong physical and magical attacks. In the books, it is a crucial defensive tool for Geralt against sorcerers and monsters. Of course, Summon. Appearing in the novel Season of Storms, this sign simply just puts the target to sleep. Now, again, each school is different, but for the School of the Wolf, the final test is the young Witcher's ability in the Trial of the Mountains. The boy is sent into the mountains surrounding Kaer Morhen and must survive for all time using only skills he has learned. The test proves he can function independently, rely on his senses, track and fight real monsters in the wild. Upon successful completion, he is given a Witcher medallion and a silver sword, officially becomes a Witcher. The final stage is the Witcher's graduation, where they venture out into the world to find their first contracts. The newly made Witcher becomes a wandering mercenary, forever set apart from normal human society due to his mutations and sterile nature. He will spend his life hunting creatures for coin, living off contracts, and using his unique abilities to survive in a hostile world until unfortunately is eventually killed. And that would be it for this video. If you liked it, leave something down below and let me know. If you have any criticism or any tips, leave it down below. If you'd like to see anything specific in the future, also leave it down below. It could be, something within the lore of The Witcher, like this video. It could be to deep dive in lore and something completely different. I don't mind. I'm just happy doing any of this, to be completely honest. But if you sat here listening to me ramble for, 20 some minutes, I guess at this point, maybe. Thank you very much. I do very much appreciate it. See you in the next one.